Hello and welcome to this episode of Game Loop. Today we're joined by Nate Stevens, environment artist and art director of some pretty major AAA franchises. Today we're going to talk about environment art and modularity. We're going to talk about next-gen graphics and Unreal 5. We're going to talk about independent games and the future of the games industry. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please stick around and I hope you enjoy this as much as I did.
Nate, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Nate Stevens. I'm actually the art director at Respawn um, on the Jedi franchise. And yeah, before that, I came up as an environment artist, um, lighting, environments, all that kind of stuff. Worked at Santa Monica Studio for a long time. I was kind of known as the God of War guy for a while. Now I do Star Wars.
Stars of War. That's awesome. Well, let's jump in and I have a couple of questions. Let's see. So I guess my main question is, or not my main question, but first question being, what got you into games? Are you a gamer? And what do you love about making games?
So, I mean, yeah, I started out as just a guy that played games. I've been in the industry for 20 years now, so I've been around a while. The games I grew up with as a kid were much different in terms of like graphics and stuff than what we're doing now. But yeah, I consider myself a gamer. I don't get to play as much anymore just because of life and stuff. But I mean, I would beat the Souls games multiple times. I like open world games, Red Dead Redemption. Course, the Star Wars games, third person action adventure, is sort of my specialty in the industry.
Right.
But yeah, gamer first. I wish I could play more games. I have kids and they play way more games than I do now, which is kind of a shame because I have to ask them like, "Hey, what's cool? What's?" They're more on the cutting edge of that, where I'm sort of like the graphics guy.
I have kids too, but they're not quite at the age yet where I want them to be. You know, dedicating every waking minute to staring at the TV. So, um,
They'll get there. Yeah, sooner than you think they'll be doing it. And then like I find myself like telling them to stop playing games and do something else. But they're like, but dad, sure you want us to play games? And I actually have them test our game. Like, so Jedi Survivor was the last game we shipped here. And I let them, like, when it was almost done, I'd let them come and play it. And they played it for hours and hours and they would find bugs. And one of them actually found a pretty critical game breaking bug near the end. So it was like, can I be in the credits? I'm like, no, it's not how it
Sorry.
that's funny. Well, did you have a specific like? You remember early on when you were younger, like what kind of sparked your interest in wanting to follow that as a career opportunity?
Well, so when I was like a kid, there was really no
Yeah.
video game industry. People were kind of doing it in their garages, and Atari and Midway were around making, um, like arcade games, for the big box in the
Right.
arcades and stuff. Uh, and so there was no Gnomon or online tutorials when I was trying to figure it out. We just sort of I was in this generation that just decided they wanted to make games, and we just sort of figured it out. Like there was no like you had to go to Barnes Noble bookstore and then buy a book, and it was like this giant manual, looked like the Bible, and it'd be like 3D Studio, and then you'd go and you'd read the book and figure it out. And the version who wrote the book didn't actually work in games or movies or anything. It was just kind of like an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
So we just sort of figured stuff out, and somehow I got a job in the industry. It took me years and years. I mean, I worked for a long time, just trying to
Yeah.
come up with a meager portfolio, which if I was to show it now, it would be laughable, like compared to what kids are doing these days.
Right.
But I kind of got in right when 3D was becoming like a thing in games. And so I was lucky enough to be in that kind of pioneering group, I guess you could say, that was pushing all the stuff forward, like the first people to touch ZBrush, the first people to touch Substance and Houdini. That's sort of my generation.
What was the first game you worked on?
So the first game I worked on was an MMO called City of Heroes, and it came out in, oh my, I think like 2003, 2002 is when we shipped it. Um, and then we did a game called City of Villains, which was like a follow-up, but it was like one of those online multiplayer games. I think people are trying to turn it back on, but it had a nice like 10, 15 year run on the servers. But yeah, I was there for about 4 years. That was my first job. And I was just they hired me as a level designer. I didn't even get to model or texture. I would take the stuff other people made and I would kind of assemble it into levels. So I mean, I was happy as it could be, making
Yeah,
games.
that's awesome. Well, yeah, I guess I haven't really given you much um, backstory on who I am, what I do. I'm actually in the, I guess you could say I'm in the film industry, but it's mostly commercial work lately. That I work in advertising as an animator and video editor, but I do a lot of 3D, like done some purely 3D 30-second commercial spots for like a jewelry store and things like that. But I have a strong interest in game development, and I've been pushing myself to learn all the ins and outs of processes that are involved in making games. And so, hence the desire for me to start this podcast and reach out to professionals that are doing it daily, uh, like yourself. Been doing it long enough to have pretty good habits and pretty good techniques.
And I've been watching you post on X, Twitter, the stuff. It's like a little survival horror. I mean, it's very like kind of dark and scary.
That's the goal, yeah. It's still very loose in terms of gameplay. There's little to no gameplay thus far, but I'm building out, the vibe and the mood and the setting. Um, but I'm rethinking a little bit about how it's constructed, and I know that we've gone back and forth a few times on X, and talking about modularity versus like building out entire walls and things like that.
Well, I mean, honestly, making your own game and the indie scene is, I hold anyone who jumps into that in very high regard because the amount of stuff you have to know, like I consider myself like somewhat of an expert in my little, you know, uh, category of making 3D art and third person games, but there's a lot of the process even of making like a whole game that I don't know a lot about, like how the riggers do their stuff. Like, okay, I sort of understand what that is, but I couldn't teach anybody. I couldn't do it for myself.
Right.
So making an indie game and all the stuff you have to know, it's like a miracle to me. But at the same time, I feel like it is sort of the future now because the information is 20 years ago, 15 years ago is impossible. You just didn't know how to learn all the things you needed to know. But now it's all sitting there on YouTube. I mean, half the information is like really, really bad. But I mean, is that at least there is information you can use to get started.
Exactly. And that kind of brings you to one of the points that I wanted to cover with you is like, how do you feel about the future of the industry? And do you find that there's some fear to going with more indie, smaller teams and more, um, I don't know. I've seen successful games like Clear Obscure Expedition 33. That one popped off pretty well, and it was made by 33 people. Apparently, there's all this talk that they also hired a bunch of outsourcing.
Yeah, they had co-development, which is common. I mean,
Yeah, but it's still a small core team, and the game did really well. It seems like they call it their passion. Um, they built something they wanted to make rather than trying to cater to you know analytics or whatever, like the zeitgeist, or I don't know.
well, here's the irony, having been in the industry a long time, and I've seen it go up and down, and we've had waves of hiring sprees where there was, everyone was getting hired and there's been lots of profitability. And then there's downturns. I mean, what we're seeing now, I've seen 3 or 4 times that, this one's a little different. There's some other factors that are different, but the irony is if you make a game and you're just creative and like you don't try to follow it has to be just like this. Those are usually the games that become very successful and become the new thing that everyone tries to chase. And so, but when you work, so I've never worked on an indie game. I've always been in like the big, multi-$100 million budget games. But the future is smaller teams, no matter how you cut it. Even in AAA, it's going to be smaller teams, just because we've reached a point where teams can't be, 800 people. And some of the earlier teams I was on, like in the God of War teams, they were just getting really large. They kind of didn't need to be that large. And yeah, I think what you're seeing in the industry is a lot of fat being trimmed. Unfortunately, it was a lot of talented people that are losing jobs, but the effort is to streamline studios and teams so that they can get down to 200, 100 person dev teams now instead of 800, which was starting to happen. And it's not sustainable. It's like, as much as that we might want that to be the case, you can't afford it.
Yeah. What is the pressure like on a leadership position in your case, where you're in charge of that many people, or not? I know you're not in charge of the whole team, but like, you find it more difficult to manage a bigger
So,
team?
I mean, like I said earlier, I'm art director on the Jedi team. There's 2 of us. There's another art director that he focuses a bit more on characters and things, because my background is specifically like environments, lighting,
Mhm.
props, destruction, VFX, that kind of thing. But we have 40 artists that we have to manage and take care of. And the big thing is to make sure that they're being productive, and they're everyone's kind of contributing to the project, because if they're not, then people notice. And with this effort to streamline, you want to make sure everyone is contributing. And that's some pressure on my end, is to make sure that we hire good people and they're being productive.
Totally understand that. Well, do you want to shed a little light on the grid and tell me a little bit about your process about making modular environment art? Or I guess speaking as an environment artist rather than an art director, I guess. But then I guess you could transition maybe into talking about how how you review art and how you review if kids are going to work together correctly, or like, what's the transition like between being an actual environment artist and doing it in more of a leadership role?
The last few years, I did a few tutorials, and I taught a CGMA class where it turned out like I did 2 CGMA classes basically, where the class was full of people who had already finished art school. And to my surprise, they had no idea about some of the absolute basics, which were like modularity, making sure things snap onto a grid, because in a production environment, that's how levels are put together. Everything kind of snaps together. So there was massive hold. I was a little surprised that this was the case. So in these 2 classes, I really like hammered to those students, like, hey, this is how it actually works. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to actually turn this into a tutorial for people. And I tried to make it free. Gumroad made me charge $1 because it's over like 50 megabytes or whatever. But if anyone wants it, they could just like DM me and I'll like send it to them. It was just like, it's a 20-minute video. I'm like, listen, this is the basics of how game art is made. And schools aren't teaching it. They're teaching all kinds of stuff, but you really can't make the art unless you understand like the plate it all has to sit on. And so the grid lines up with texture sizes. So texture sizes in games are like, they always double, but they're actually quadruple, because we're talking about 2 axes. So you have a 1024 texture, it becomes 2K, then becomes 4K, then becomes 8K. Each time it sort of doubles in length and width, but the size is 4 times. And that lines up exactly with how a grid works, a grid that goes up and down. And that's how a game is assembled. Either artists or level designers will take parts and they'll put it onto the grid and they'll snap it around and through this like Lego process create levels. So you really can't make game art unless you understand how the end user is going to use the art. Sometimes you assemble it, other times someone else is assembling it. So they're grabbing your walls and your floors, and it needs to all snap together. If it doesn't, they're stuck.
Yeah. Right, and then you end up with overlapping pieces, and there might be like Z fighting and stuff like that.
It creates messiness, yeah, and then that will surface in the lighting phase. Usually, is when that will all, oh no, come back to bite you. Now you're making an indie game, right? So you're making a bunch of parts to be on the grid. The good news is for someone like you, you're the own end user. You can work around that. No one's gonna come like knock on your office door and be like, "Hey, I can't actually use all the pieces you made because
Right.
the pivot points are crazy and stuff."
Yeah. That's true. That is true. But I do want to be sane, and I want to build it with some system so that I'm not beating my head against the wall trying to figure out how things connect and all that kind of stuff. So
Well, let me say this one thing because I tell this to everybody because I've encountered it and any like artist who's been around has encountered it. You will make plans at the beginning for how you're going to build something, and they're always going to be 50% wrong. In the end, you'll look back and be like, oh, I could have done this like this. It's just the key is just try your best to be modular, make stuff snap in a way that works. But they like rocks don't really snap together, they're kind of organic. And there's a lot of edge cases why these things don't work. And any artist I know who's made a level looks back and they think half of it was a mistake. Or they could have done it differently. So you can't sit there and plan a ton at the beginning and waste time. Just you kind of have to go. Just jump in. Just start going is your best strategy.
right. I've kind of done that. I've gone over the same building like 3 times. Setting out initially to build it modularly and realizing that some of the pieces don't work because of, I don't know. I've had other discussions with other environment artists that have shed some light. Like, if you're building some blueprints, you're probably gonna overwork and build a bunch of stuff that you're not really gonna use, and that's what I'm doing. I'm building from a set of old blueprints from 100 years ago that in theory I'd like to stick to how I would like to stick to the original design and kind of bring life back into this old demolished building that doesn't exist anymore. But in practice, I'm coming to realize that I might just need to build what I need, and rather than build the entire building. So
Yeah, there's a saying, it doesn't have to be right. It has to look right. So a lot of stuff's like a movie. Like when we did the old God of War games that were a fixed camera. I don't know if you've ever played those, or kind of a while ago.
yeah, I've played them all.
If you took the camera, looked like 10 meters to the left, there's nothing. It's just
Oh, wow.
airspace. Like they were just movie sets. So a lot of times the camera's running through and there's nothing behind Kratos. If you stop the camera and turned around, there's nothing there. They're just built to kind of show what the camera would show. And then sometimes the camera designer would like move it. And we're like, oh, great. Now we got to build a little bit more, but it was all fake. That's how we got those to run in frame, because it only drew what the camera was looking at.
Right, and I'm familiar with that in my line of work now. That's how I build things for commercial.
Right, yeah.
I'm not going to build everything behind the camera, but they're never going to be seen. But like in a first person game where you have freedom to look in every direction, it's a little bit different. When you want some level of like exploration, so that the player will get to walk around and get curious about something and go into different rooms, that I don't want to lock everything down, and I don't know. I'm torn. Like, I really want to build the whole thing and have it like this really cool old building that's fully explorable, but then at the same time, like, this is really unfeasible for one person to do by myself.
So you were asking about how you transition from environmental art to like a leadership role, right? And
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
I spend, and this relates to what you're saying. I spend a large portion of my day dealing with what we call scope
Hmm.
and the ideas, and are they feasible? So we have all kinds of great ideas, but at the end of the day, look, do we have time to do this? Do we have enough people to do this? I spend a good portion of my day like tracking down, like, dude, can we build this in time? We have years to work
Hmm.
on these games. But even then, it's like, shoot, can this artist build this whole thing in 3 years? I don't know. So for you, it's like you really have to. The death of a lot of games is overambition. Is they just overscope themselves right from the start. I would say, it's probably half of games that fail. They just got off to an idea that is not executable. So for an indie game, I think that's even more dire. You have to like, okay, what can I actually have time to make? And
Yeah.
I said, like, I've started a few personal projects in the last year, and I've gone nowhere with them really. It's like on my and I do this, so I bit off more than I can shoot. Basically, it's so easy to
Like,
do that.
once I start seeing that and thinking that way, it's like a immediate, like, I just shut down and I'm like, oh God, there's too much there. I can't even look at it. But I don't know. Sometimes I get the drive to get back in, and I'm just like picking myself up by my bootstraps or whatever, however you want to say it, and just getting after it again. But like, it's definitely, I definitely need to trim and figure out. There's so many different other components that I don't even know how to do yet. So I know that there's like some programming stuff and AI stuff that I have not implemented at all. That
Mhm.
if it's going to be a game, it's going to need to include a few other things other than environmental art. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, if I was going to make an indie game, probably the very first thing I would do would be just mentally say this is going to take me years. Probably like 3 to 4 years, just
Mhm.
because there's the amount of learning and content, and like how long do you want it to be? You know, 4 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours. I mean, a lot of decisions have to be made to get to your goal play time. But yeah, it's like from what I've seen of the indie scene, they don't make games in 6 months or a year. It's years of
Yeah, for sure.
work.
Can we talk about sort of how environment art sits within the pipeline as far as like where do you get your directives from and how much influence does the art department have on narrative and gameplay and story and things like that? Like, you get concept art from a concept artist, or you get levels from a level designer.
Who
And
starts?
so, yeah.
A team that knows what it's doing. Where I see a lot of games sit in pre-production for 3 or 4 years and then get canceled. That's usually because they can't figure out who starts, and everyone's or people are starting at the same time.
Yeah.
The key is someone needs to start, and that's usually the narrative department, figuring out, okay, what is the overall story arc? It doesn't have to be very detailed, but A to Z, what is happening in this game?
Yeah.
And it should be a pretty simple story at the beginning. From there, we all kind of run off and start interpreting that how we can. So if the narrative says, okay, here's the story, I'll look at that as like the art director, be like, okay, what locations would we need to go to? What's the characters gonna look like, enemies? And we start like really early concepts where we're just kind of concepting ideas like, okay, in terms of like, let's say we're doing a Star Wars, it's like, okay, what planets would we go to? Do we need to invent our own planets? Um, and then it once people kind of start contributing, it starts bouncing back and forth, like you're saying. Like the narrative department might see like an idea you have for a biome or a planet and be like, "Oh, cool, we can do this." And then that's when things kind of start slowing down,
Yeah.
and we all start working together because all the ideas are kind of colliding. And that's why I guess people like me exist in studios, like people at this whatever director level is. I sit there and watch all the ideas bouncing around, and I have to kind of guess what I think is going to be the best one and start promoting it and getting everyone to run with it. So we have a narrative director. He does the same thing. He looks around, it's like, okay, what's best for the story? Oh, can we go here? Can we do this? And we just have to set the course based on all the awesome ideas that are floating around. And then some ideas are extremely technical, like, oh, we're going to do something that's so visually wild. It's like, can we even do that in 3 to 4 years? It sounds good, but is this wise? So we bury a lot of really amazing ideas because, well, I would say good teams do. A lot of unfortunately the layoffs we've seen is because teams have like spun wheels for a long time, and it's very easy to blame the publisher, which I'm not saying they're not, responsible for a lot of what's happened, but a lot of times the team itself is in complete like dysfunction. It just isn't moving forward.
Yeah. How do you think that rectifies itself? Do you need more experienced people in certain positions that can steer that sort of thing? Or
Yeah, you need someone who's seen the beginning from the end a few times to be able to know what to avoid. And it's hard if you like, you can take a really talented artist, and if you put him in a leadership position, he might absolutely bury you with this. Like I was bringing up the scope, like, oh, we're going to do this giant open world, and you can go anywhere and chop down any tree, and next thing you know, that's just not possible. So you need experienced people to have good ideas and also know what you can get done in time. And even then, like, it's so hard to get a game out on time. I don't think the last 4 or 5 games I've done, have come out at the time we thought they were going to come out.
right.
The 2018 God of War was originally a 3-year development cycle, and it came out 5. So it was like 2 years late.
How was that to work on? I know that was a big shift in the franchise. Was it difficult to pivot and work with the new constraints like the uncut camera and all that kind of stuff?
Yes and no. Our game director is like one of the greatest ever, and so he showed up with like, here's the vision, here's what we're doing. Like I said, good leadership.
Yeah.
He's just like, here's what this game is going to be, and like 5 years later, it was what he said it was going to be. It didn't shift around and change a whole bunch, So excellent vision, but there was a lot of I mean, we had done 4 or 5 God of War games with the fixed camera, and people near the end, people were tired of it. There's fatigues. We're like, shoot, anytime you reboot something, are people going to like it? It's like, oh, people are going to like it. And we did this big E3 demo in 2016 where we didn't know if people were going to hate it or like it. Kratos to that point had not been super popular. Like a lot of people did not like him. This guy always yells, and he was kind of not a beloved character, but we put him to bed for 4 years. And when we finally revealed it, all of a sudden people liked him.
Then show me what you know. I am hungry. Feed us.
So we're like, okay, cool.
I do remember hearing like a lot of the journalists in the games media were talking a lot of smack about God of War was, too aggressive and machismo and like aggro dude, and it didn't fit in the modern world. So I thought that was really cool the way that it was handled.
That's all. That is totally true. But the game industry has changed so much from the time I've been in it. I mean, the first God of War came out in 2005, I believe, and there was like sex scenes in it and just brutal violence. And people at that point, that was fantastic. People loved it. I think the first I worked on every God of War but the first one. I started at Santa Monica right when it was finishing up, or so I didn't touch that game. But the public loved it. And these were the days, not to date myself, when we'd go to E3 and there would be like strippers and booth babes, and there was like, it was just a party atmosphere that was, looking back, totally inappropriate. But this was a young industry with no regulations, and just kind of Wild West. It has cleaned itself up over the years. We don't even have E3 anymore, but we started to have E3 with less bikini models walking around, and so yeah, God of War timed itself out as being this like kind of like one brain cell aggressive guy, is one dimensional, and Corey, who he was the game director on God of War 2, he came back to reboot it, and he was just like, hey, there's a natural progression that this can all take to like fit in with us all growing up, because we were young, when we made those games. We were like mid-20s, we're just a bunch of jerks, really.
Right.
But now now all of us are like married and have kids, and we're like, okay, we need to make more responsible games, I guess. And so he married that, he brought, yeah.
I thought it was brilliant, and to have Kratos have a son, and to have him try to rectify his shitty behavior, and like train his son how to not be a rage monger like he was. It's kind of cool.
We actually had some levels in the 2018, or there are some ideas that didn't really materialize, of Kratos and his son getting split up. They do get split up in one part of the game, and Kratos is by himself. And there's a time where like, okay, he's going to revert back, and we're gonna get the bad, because Kratos is not a good guy. He's like a bad guy, really. Boy, he's gonna become the bad guy again. But then we kind of backed off on that, or the writers did, and stuff.
Yeah. I think there is a moment where you get separated, and he has to like get fully enraged to break free or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, it didn't revert to what we did in like the early games, where he would just sacrifice. Like so there's for God of War 3, there's an E3 demo, which I was the artist that built the demo. Well, there's character. I did the environments, right, and the lighting, but there was guys that did the characters. And there's a point where you're climbing on this building, and there's just like a civilian hanging there, and you grab it and smash his head on the building and throw him off. It's like,
Why did you do that?
well, yeah, that's mean, and then you'd have pulling the dude's head off and using it as a flashlight. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, those games are really. I mean, I loved them when I played them. I do recognize that they are pretty. The values in those games are a little dated, as you say.
Yeah.
The combat was fun, obviously, at that. But yeah, I've played through every instance of a God of War game that's been released, and I've enjoyed most of them. Some of them more than others, but they're all really well built, well made, and I can appreciate the writing, the direction, and all the art is fantastic. So for all your contributions to those games, I commend you and I appreciate your work.
Yeah, they're cool to work on. I was lucky just to end up working on those. Just dumb luck, honestly. But you were asking earlier, like, how's the industry evolving? All those games back then, and like Uncharted, like all the Sony first party games, or a lot of games in general, were not long. God of War games for like 10 to 15 hours. And then there became this, push to make everything open world in 100 hours and 80 hours. That's why teams have ballooned up really big. But I sense there's a lot of fatigue now, where not everyone wants a game to be 100 hours. I think people would actually welcome a less than 20-hour game consistently now, because there's so much stuff to consume. So I think naturally our industry is going to go down to smaller teams. Like the God of War teams were 100 people. They were not a lot of us at all. We just all, and so I think games we're going to start seeing. It's kind of like the indie thing. When indie games are small, you're going to see AAA games maybe shrink in playtime. Not be 50 hours, but they can be 15, 20 hours. The quality will be very high, because that's where AAA, that's where the money goes, is actors and mocap and all that. And I think team sizes will shrink, and maybe we'll end up getting more games that are shorter, that are more creative. And if they don't make $1 billion, it's okay, because you didn't invest 300 million into them. So there's this big thing where, like, notice there's less games coming out, and they're bigger and they're more risky, and that's just, it's not good for anybody, really. Like, Go back to more choice.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say, I'm like, bring back the AA games and things like that. I personally can't spend as much time on a single game as I used to, or I just choose not to, I guess. But I have several games installed on my PlayStation right now that are just half completed because I got to a certain point and got stuck, and then I was not in the mood to play it anymore.
Yeah, they just get too long. Like I was gonna play Death Stranding when it first came out, and then someone's like, it's 80 hours. I was like, I can't do it. I don't have much time. And then I proceeded to play Elden Ring for like 200 hours. So I
Right.
found the time, but yeah.
I'm the same way. Like I can tolerate that much time in a FromSoft game for some reason, but I think there's something to be said about the game loop in Blizz games that keeps you invested, keeps you interested in proceeding.
And to your point you're making, I like, okay, yeah, they're AAA games, but they're really AA games in terms of production value. Like there's not fancy cutscenes where you have a mocap famous actor. The art is kind of B tier, it's kind of cobbled together in a way that's, not the greatest, I would say. I would keep in mind, I love these games. These are my favorite games. So I'm not like ragging on. I'm just saying the production values of them are kind of AA, but they make AAA money and they win Game of the Year and they're like considered to be that. So that's where the industry needs to go. I think is like, does everything need to be the greatest looking? And this is weird coming from me because the projects I work on have always been like, okay, we have to be the best looking game ever made. And to the project I'm working on now, it's the same thing. Like this is going to be the best looking game ever made, but not everyone has to do that.
Yeah. What is it like to shift with the new generations and things like that? Like, how do you? Is there a R&D phase where you have to push the limits of the hardware to see what the new generation graphics are supposed to look like, or is it just a trial and error? Every game's kind of a new experiment.
It's so hard. This is where like sometimes the public, not to like rant or go off on a tangent, but the public, like if a game fails, a lot of times the public's like lazy devs, or they don't know what they're doing. And maybe sometimes there's some truth to that, but more often than not, people don't understand how impossible it is to make a game because the question you just posed, considering a 4-hour or 4-year development cycle, the video cards are going to go through 2 different generations. The console hardware is going to get a new version or maybe a plus version, like PlayStation. What was the PlayStation 5 Plus, whatever I forget what we called it? Yeah, the Pro model that was twice as fast. So when you're making all these decisions at the beginning that have to last through 4 years, we have to completely guess on like, oh shoot, what is going to run? What are we going to be? And you see a lot of games come out running poorly. It's because of decisions made 3 years ago and the landscape wasn't what we thought it was. Our video cards didn't speed up the way we thought, or they told us, like we work with the vendors like, hey, what are we looking at in 4 years? Or, how fast is the new PlayStation going to be?
Yeah.
So we totally guess. And like on the project going on now, we are doing the same thing. We're like, okay, we think it's going to be like this, but we are pushing a certain envelope. But if it doesn't reach that, then all of a sudden you run into performance problems. But to push the industry forward and, push the envelope, you have to do that to be the tip of the spear. We have to kind of go for broke and then rein it in if we have to at the end.
Yeah, you do some optimizations on the back end, I guess.
But Unreal 5 has changed. Not every studio is using it, but a lot are now. A lot of people are jumping in. The tech in Unreal 5 is like, we don't count polygons anymore. All the rules we kind of followed for optimization are completely out the window now. Like sometimes we don't even bake normal maps, because the poly counts are so high. We're like, oh, I guess I don't really need a normal map. It's just expensive geometry.
Yeah, that's interesting. because I'm building my game in Unreal 5, but I'm not savvy enough to at this point anyway to understand how to keep it performing well without going overboard on polygons. Or I mean, without completely optimizing meshes and everything. But yeah, I can't even imagine just throwing all that out the window and just throwing in. I know when they revealed Unreal 5, they were throwing in fully ZBrush sculpted meshes that were instanced like 100,000 times and that. And I haven't found it that easy to do that, but I know that there's ways. I don't know what I'm getting at there.
No, I mean it. So it is the reality now. So I had a test scene a while ago just on my own. I just grabbed a bunch of Megascans assets, slammed it together, and I think the scene was 6 billion polygons in my test scene, and it ran at 60 frames a second.
Wow.
But the problem was the amount of memory that it took for all the meshes was unshippable.
Yeah.
Like just my little level of 6 billion, total triangles was hundreds of megabytes of data, and that are like multiple gigabytes. So it's like if you do the math, that can't scale to a shipping game. So it's like, yeah, there's an endless poly count, but the disk size would be humongous. These are things we're wrangling with. Like, okay, yeah, there's a tech demo, and then they're shipping a game and fitting it on a Blu-ray or 2 Blu-rays or a less than terabytes download size or something.
How do you Europe like UV maps and stuff if you're not breaking down to like optimal geometry? Just do it.
It's a whole new world. The higher the poly count is, and if it means you don't need a normal map anymore, the UV seams can be actually quite sloppy because you won't see them because there's so many polygons, it turns out. So there's a lot of triplanar mapping going on. Your standard programs like Blender and Maya can't even unwrap some of the nanite geometry anymore. The poly counts are too high, so we have to rely on rhizome. If the poly count's even too high, then triplanar it in the engine. I mean, the way we've worked for a long time has completely changed in the last 2 years.
Wow. Be curious to see a demo on something like that, just to see like how different things have gotten. Because I know that there's not really a whole lot out there on that sort of a workflow. It's still pretty.
Yeah, there's not, because I don't think any game really has shipped with what like, we're not the only team doing it, but lots of teams who are on Unreal 5 and are shooting for 2 to 3 years out from now or something are in this brand new world of rules.
Yeah.
And some of them are extreme time savers, which we need in the industry. We need to, with all the AI is going to save time. It's bullshit. It doesn't fucking save any time. I mean, I've never seen AI do anything to like help with UVs or, it's sort of like I don't want to go into this tangent, but I kind of wish they would make some tools that would help us with AI. Like, hey, have it unwrap my mesh or have it like pack my UVs or something like that. But they seem to be going just for the straight, like, oh, let's have it remove an entire human, which is why it's going to fail ultimately. I feel like is because they're not just using it to actually help humans; they're using it to replace humans, and that's not going to end well. Anyway, well, I'm saying is a lot of the new way of building is extreme time saving. So if you sculpted a rock before, you'd have to sculpt it, then you'd have to bake it and do all these steps where things could go wrong. Now you sculpt a rock with ZBrush and decimate it down a little bit, and it's like, okay, it doesn't even need a normal. I just put it in the game.
That's cool. But then where does the texture come from? You just I guess you said it earlier. You're doing triplanar mapping and stuff.
Or people cut it up in UVs and stuff, but it's not, because there's more polygons, you don't see the seams like you used to on lower poly stuff. So artists kind of unreal stuff pretty fast.
You just auto unwrap.
And some cleanup, or rhizome, which is a really good unwrapping program. It will it'll do a good job of selecting edge loops and stuff on triangulated meshes. So
Mhm.
that was one problem before. If you go into ZBrush and decimate a rock down, and I might be getting too granular for whoever's listening to this,
Sure.
but the decimation process is all triangles. So if you try to like double click and get an edge loop in Maya or Blender, it's like, what? We don't understand that at all.
Yeah.
But programs like Rhino do. So you can kind of select one edge and it'll make a connection point. So unwrapped and stuff is very fast. For shader work, everyone is using these days a layered shader approach,
Okay.
which is pretty much just Substance Painter recreated in Unreal.
Okay. I mean, I'd love to see that.
Just imagine how does Substance Painter work? It's a new layer where you assign a tiling texture
Yeah.
and you put a mask in it to determine what it does. We just
Yeah.
recreate that in Unreal. And this is not something just like my team is doing, like everyone is doing this. It's the same thing. You create a new layer, assign a tiling texture, and put a mask in. The benefit being in Unreal, they're live. So
Yeah.
you can share, if you have like 18 rocks, they're not 18 different textures like they used to be. They're all pulling from the same 4 or 5 tiling materials and being masked on real time in the engine.
That's cool. And so I guess you go with object ID masks or something like that, or I don't know. Sort of say something that has a bunch of different parts, like in order to assign different parts, different materials.
Yeah, there's a giant rabbit hole of request artists. It sounds very simple what I just explained at the base level it is, but once you actually go try to make something, there's like, oh, but in this case, I need a second UV set, or oh shoot, I need to, this needs to be multiple materials and be a texel density, which is another super important thing that has gotten lost in the industry in the last 10 years is keeping texel density. And I've sort of had to be like one of the guys. There's a lot of us, but I made a tutorial on that as well. I think it's actually the same one as the grid tutorial.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I grabbed that tutorial from the other day, and it's really good.
Games are messing this up left and right, and it's like us old school guys are just like, no, because back in the day, like we didn't have texture resolution on like God of War 2. Let's go all the way back. There was 32 pixels per meter. So I mean, everything was kind of blurry. But if you were off by a little amount, it was so blurry that it just looked like shit.
Right.
And so these days resolutions are higher. You don't notice the mismatch, but anytime you're in a game and you see something like you see the table and it's all like nice and sharp and there's like a blurry book on it, that's just like, to me, it's like immersion breaking 101. Don't do that.
Yeah. Or there's like a brick texture that's like 3 times the size of a real brick.
Yeah.
That always looks great.
Yeah, when bricks are like this big, it's like, hey, artists, go look at the. But a lot of times that's scaling, and that's another rule of texel density is you do not scale anything. As soon as you scale it, that pixel is bigger, and it could look blurry next to one that is not scaled. So I've seen that a lot with young artists. They're like, wait, I can't take the plant and scale it up. I can't take the rock and scale up. No, if you want another bigger rock, you have to make a bigger rock. Unfortunately, we don't scale anything.
Yeah. 1 raster scale.
I think there's a small section of like tech minded people that like to see evolution in games, like technical evolution. So they're always pushing for more fidelity, more photorealism. The problem with trying to really be completely photoreal is it's expensive. It takes so much longer to nail it. Because if it's off a little bit, the closer you get, and then you're off a little, you get that uncanny valley thing with like faces and stuff. So ultimate photorealism is, it's really hard and expensive and dangerous if you get it wrong. Like it can be almost comical. You're trying to do something serious.
Yeah.
So I think what a lot of studios think about, like Uncharted games or like Last of Us or God of War, or the Jedi games I work on, they're realistic looking, but no one's trying to actually get 100% photoreal, because it's really like, how do you do that in the environment? That means you have to scan everything. You doing photoreal by hand, like a photoreal rock, is going to take you 4 times as long. You're just going to sit there So you need some kind of basis in reality, which means you had to scan it. And if you're working on a game that's fantasy or sci-fi, how do you scan that stuff that doesn't exist? So there's a mismatch. And the mismatch is obvious when you see a scanned asset next to one that's not. They look shitty. So, yes, I think people are pushing for realism, but not trying to go insane because of the practical problems with it. Some games need to be more like quote unquote photoreal than others, like third person action adventure story movie games, like
Right.
again, like the Naughty Dog games or Insomniac games, Spider-Man and stuff. Those cutscenes are not going to hit right if it's completely stylized. It's just not the same.
Yeah.
Besides that, other games are being stylized. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't affect sales or anything. You look at World of Warcraft, probably the most money-making game of all time.
Yeah.
It's just a stylized, like it looked from 20 years ago almost. One thing I'll say for students, because I deal a lot with like people wanting me to look at the portfolio or people that have been laid off and want to know why. There is a direct correlation between being able to find work and not having photoreal attempted stuff in your portfolio. I see, unfortunately, a lot of people who have gotten laid off and are having a hard time finding work only have stuff that looks like you would working at Riot Games or Blizzard. Just it's only stylized, and that is like a massive limiting factor to finding work. For some reason, you could have photoreal only in your portfolio, and a stylized studio would probably hire you because it's harder. It's harder to do. So it's like, yeah, if you can do that, you can do our stylized version.
Yeah.
Flip side, if you have only stylized, you are not going to get a job at anything that looks photoreal.
That makes sense. And there's only a handful of studios that are doing that sort of stuff. Anyway.
Exactly. Besides indies, I think if you're doing an indie, you're smart to go find a style. And so the 2018 God of War, which was like a visual masterpiece, like we worked for 5 years and made it look great. We didn't win any art direction or graphics awards, barely. We kept losing to a game called The Legend of Obra Dinn. Which if you look at it, it's a very cool game and everything, but it's a stylized filter. But people saw that like that's great art direction, and that whooped us at every award. So proof you don't need photoreal doesn't mean you're better in the eyes of people who have no idea how any of this is built.
No.
People thought that game looked better overall or had a better art direction than God of War. Mind you, it was one guy.
Right.
It was an indie game by one guy beat out a mega team of like 50 of the best environment artists in the world. Got schooled.
Right. I mean, yeah, I guess there's something to be said for it being different and not that God of War wasn't different, but it was something that people weren't used to seeing, I guess.
Yep, it's totally the case. When God of War 3 came out, we thought we were a great looking game and going to win some, best art awards. We didn't.
Mm-hmm.
We lost to, at the time it was, oh shoot, it was like a side scroller game. It was like black and white. Oh man, I was spacing on the name of it. I feel bad.
Limbo?
Yeah. Limbo beat God of War 3 in graphic. And our art director at the time was like, could our team make Limbo? Yes. Could the Limbo team make God of War? Absolutely not. But it doesn't matter. The public thought that was a cooler looking game, or writers and award people, whoever the fuck they are, thought that was a cooler looking game. So to your point, like it doesn't really matter for success at all.
Mm-hmm. What do you say about, you were speaking to students a second ago, what do you say about the idea of, do you think that the industry is shifting to more like generalist roles, or do you find that it is still pretty important to specialize in a certain area?
So I think we're shifting back to more generalist because teams need to, just because of the financial side of things, they need to get smaller, which means more people need to know how to do everything. For example, like in the older days, there was no such thing as a lighting artist. Like on God of War 2 and 3, we didn't have any lighting artists. The environment artists went and they lit their level at the end. But then when, budgets increased, we're like, oh, it'd be nice to have someone come in and light it. And then, okay, so now we have lighting artists. And then the lighting artist oh, well, we would like to have another kind of artist that just does the cinematics. We have a cinematic lighter. It started splitting up in all these subcategories. And I think just naturally that's going to start kind of reversing itself as teams get smaller. So I think it's always been a good idea to be a generalist.
Yeah,
It's just you're more valuable.
I appreciate that you've been available. A lot of people argue, like, don't meet your heroes or whatever, things like that. But I tend to disagree with that. If I want to talk to somebody, I will track them down, try to have a dialogue with people that are aesthetic. So I appreciate that you've been open.
Yeah, I've seen this a lot from like students and maybe like junior artists and stuff that they're like scared to bug people. But my experience in the game industry in 20 years is most people are very nice and cool, and the ones that aren't usually exit themselves out by just being a jerk or something like that. I always tell people
Yeah.
be nice, and most of the real badass dudes that have been around are super approachable and cool. And the thing is, like, I came up in a time when everything was gate kept. Like I said, when I was trying to break into the industry, there's nothing, there's no information. People were doing stuff, but they wouldn't share. There's new tutorials, and
Mhm.
people want to show their secret because whatever dumb reason. I'm glad that's why I said I want to be the opposite. If people bug me, I'll talk to anybody. I have people randomly show up on Discord like, I can ask a question. I'm like, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and it's awesome. It's been some of the most helpful advice that I've gotten has been from you and other like pros that are actually doing this stuff daily. So I appreciate it. Um, so,
No, you're welcome.
yeah, well, I guess that'll do it for today. Like I said, this is Nate Stevens. Nate, thank you for being here. Thank you for contributing to this podcast. And if if you're up for it, maybe we'll do a round two at some point.
Yeah, just let me know when.
All right, man. It was good talking. Thanks for being here.
Yep, thank you.
All right, see you.
Bye.
Thanks for sticking around to the end. I appreciate that more than you know. And if you're interested in checking out Nate's grid and texel density tutorial, I've left a link below. You can check that out. And if you're interested in following along with the development of my game, I'll be making devlogs and future videos about that as well. So stick around, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.